24 hours a day. When you want to know, visit khq.com on the internet.
You're watching KHQ Channel 6, Local News.
From your Northwest News Channel, this is Q6 News at 5.
Snowplows are easing the slushy drive on Lookout Pass. Winter has hit some parts of the inland Northwest, and if it hasn't hit you yet, just wait. Good evening, I'm Beverly Carr. Thanks for joining us. For thousands, it couldn't come soon enough, but Lookout Pass Ski Resort opened today. It's the first mountain within comfortable driving distance in the inland Northwest. Q6 reporter Janet Stanglin spent the day up there. Janet, how were conditions?
Well, you know, they were much better than most skiers expected. That's because it was about 35 inches at the peak and 22 inches at the base this morning, and it was snowing all day long, so you really needed to have some of these snow pants, and if you didn't have a hat, no matter how silly it looked, if you didn't have a hat, you were going to be wet today. Now, we want to tell you about some changes in Lookout Pass over the next few years. The owner plans to add ski lifts, ski terrain, and expand the lodge. Lookout Pass is usually the first ski area to open in the inland Northwest because it's so high. It's 4,500 feet at the base and 5,400 feet at the peak. Skiers and snowboarders say the mountain was a bit crowded today, but other than that, few complaints.
You don't have any problem when you come out here and you have conditions like this. Are you having trouble?
I can't get up.
You can't get up? Here you go. Oh, that big...
Now, that little boy was just 4 years old, and as if you noticed, he had one of these helmets on, and his dad had a helmet on as well. You'll see more and more people, both children and adults alike, especially adults who are considered experts going through those tree runs. You'll see more of them wearing these helmets. Beth?
Let's hope so. Janet, I know you're a skier. You didn't get a chance to try it out, did you?
I'm a Bunny Hill skier, and no, I didn't get a chance to try it out.
All right, maybe a little later this month. Janet Stanglin reporting live. Thanks. Tonight on Q6 News at 6 o'clock, we'll tell you how you could get a chance to own a piece of Lookout Pass. As the search intensifies for an impeachment endgame, the idea of censuring President Clinton is getting serious consideration, even from Democrats most opposed to impeachment.
Our grandchildren reading in the history books that someone lied under oath, which I think the president did, and was not rebuked for it.
You've written numberless articles.
One Judiciary Committee Republican even speculated on how a censure motion might read.
You violated any decent standards of workplace relationships between you and a junior subordinate. You made yourself and the office the butt of jokes throughout the country and throughout the world.
This week, the committee expands its probe by taking depositions from Kathleen Willey's lawyer. She has accused the president of improper actions. They'll also question a Democratic fundraiser. 10 members of that missing Colorado doomsday cult have turned up in Israel. The police in Jerusalem are keeping an eye on them, worried they may be planning a mass suicide. Their leader, Monty Kim, has said he will die in Jerusalem in December of 1999 and will be resurrected 3 days later. Israel is worried there may be a lot of that during the millennium. It is a war of words with Iraq. Iraqi officials say they cannot provide documents which don't exist. So a new confrontation appears to be building with Baghdad over its refusal to surrender papers requested by arms inspectors. The Iraqis say the papers are either missing or were destroyed after the Gulf War. Some congressional leaders don't buy it and say it's time to go after Saddam Hussein.
I'd go after him. I know the White House isn't going to like hearing me say this, but I think that if Butler is able to make the case, and he's key here, if he's able to make the case that there is any pattern that's in place here, I would go ahead and I would try to get folks out of there, and I would bomb him.
Right away.
Right away.
Iraq is accusing the chief UN weapons inspector of waging what it calls, quote, a savage campaign of disinformation. President Clinton is visiting the troops posted along the last Cold War frontier, the border between North and South Korea. North Korea's recent missile test and its refusal to allow inspectors to access to a suspected underground nuclear site has South Koreans on edge.
We will continue to press North Korea to take these steps for peace and security. But until it fully commits itself to a constructive role on this peninsula, we must remain ready. And thanks to you, We will.
Last night, the president got a hug and a standing ovation as he joined his brother Roger, who was in Seoul performing for American troops. Here's something you haven't seen in more than 50 years, a tour group heading north across the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Many people on this tour were born in the North, and this is the first time they've returned. So far, they have all been well received on their trip. In the capital of Indonesia, simmering ethnic tensions exploded into bloody unrest today. Rioters burned and looted churches and stores. At least 6 people were killed in the violence. Indonesians have been rampaging through the Chinatown district. Reports are that some of the rioters appeared friendly with the soldiers. 10 square miles of grain fields were destroyed when wildfires swept through Western Australia's wheat belt. The small farming community was devastated. Several houses were also destroyed. The entire town was threatened for a while, then the winds shifted. 6 people were hurt. A dramatic rescue off the coast of Australia. A couple was saved, but 2 men are still missing and feared dead tonight. They were stranded when a storm broke their boat's mast and rolled the 60-foot catch completely around. The American warship, the USS Shiloh, was first on the scene. The couple managed to cling to the overturned vessel for 36 hours before being spotted by a U.S. helicopter, but 50-knot winds and 6-foot waves have made visibility nearly impossible in the search for the 2 missing men. There was an unusual sight at St. Peter's Basilica today. Bare-chested, barefooted tribespeople shared the altar with Pope John Paul II. The Pope threw out strict rules on attire to accommodate his visitors, that is, from Oceania. A blare of a conch shell opened the Mass, part of a Vatican synod of bishops from the Pacific. Oceania is home to 8 million Catholics. If you were alive then, you remember what you were doing that day. It was 35 years ago today that the U.S. lost President John F. Kennedy to an assassin. Bruce Morton looks back on that day and how this country has changed ever since.
Kings, queens, and heads of state came to Washington to pay tribute to John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
John Kennedy was murdered 35 years ago. It seems longer than that because it was such a different world. Kennedy's presidency has been in the news lately because of comparisons of his sexual escapades with those of President Clinton. One principal difference, of course, is that reporters knew about Kennedy's affairs but didn't write about them. It was Hugh Sidey of Time magazine who covered that White House remembers a different time, different manners, and besides, he adds, there was so much else to write about.
Should we have run it? I don't know. It seemed to me that we were so busy with other things it didn't matter.
And there was, of course, first and foremost, the Cold War. Go back and read Kennedy's inaugural address, a picture of a world divided into 2 armed camps.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Or the famous,
ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
A call to sacrifice quite absent from today's politics. It was a different world. The Berlin Wall went up during Kennedy's presidency. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world skated closer to nuclear war than ever before or since. It was a heavier time.
How long ago was it? Well, if President Kennedy were alive today, he'd be 81. How long ago was it? A CNN intern asked a producer a few weeks ago, when was the Cold War? That's not so silly. Think about it. Interns are mostly college students. If this one were 19, the Berlin Wall would have come down when he was 10 years old.
We're at peace now. We have troops around the world, in Japan and Korea, Germany and Bosnia, but no great war looms. And Americans are happy with the economy and with their lives. One thing, though, has not changed. Kennedy, in that inaugural speech, said,
"For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life."
We haven't done either one, but the tools, the nuclear bombs and the rest, are still ready. I'm Bruce Morton.
Around here, the longest lines at the theaters are those to see Enemy of the State and Rugrats. There was a long line back in Carlisle, Iowa today for the real-life version of Rugrats.
I'm Keith King in Carlisle, Iowa, where Bobby and Kenny McCoy opened the doors to their new home, and a few people showed up. The story coming up.
Here's the Q6 News Rundown.
Closed captioning of Q6 News is brought to you by Toyota Camry. Every